All right, what's going on, guys? Today we are going to be doing a video diving deep into how to build a thick and detailed wide back. Now, I've always been intrigued at the way that backs can develop in different ways depending on how you pull. A lot of people tend to pull with one specific area, and that's what they kind of get stuck in. So you might see somebody with some really huge rear delts, if that's what they tend to pull with. You might see somebody with some really thick mid upper traps if they tend to elevate when they row. But what I want to do is I want to help you guys understand how to know what you're pulling with. So for whatever your goal is. So if you need more lat, let's pull with lat. If you need a little more thickness, let's pull with the muscles that are going to contribute to that. You want rear delt, let's put the focus over there a little bit. And we're going to cover some of the common mistakes that a lot of people make and some of the techniques that I've done myself to build up a pretty good back, because my back used to be terrible. It was like by far my weakest body part, and now it's one of my best. So real quick, we'll just look at a comparison of the back shot from North Americans this year, where I took 4th place in the light heavies. And if you just look at me right here, I have a really different level of detail to my back than pretty much everybody else there. This is the guy who won, and he looks really good as well. But I just got a little bit more things going on, and that's because I train in a way that really keeps tension on these back muscles. I don't orient my rib cage around, and I don't use techniques that's going to take tension off of what I'm trying to hit. And this wasn't always the case. So here was my back during my last classic physique show I did, and you can just see it's missing a lot of pop. I don't have nearly as much development on these mid traps. These lats don't pop out nearly as much. I mean, my arms look the same size, but my back looks half the size. So yeah, this was my last contest prep getting ready for North Americans, and here's a little bit of a comparison so you can just see the difference. And this is really a credit to how I changed up my back training, because I used to train with a lot of extension, just kind of the way most people do on the left, and then on the right, I really focused on keeping as much relative motion in my back day as possible. So I talked about this a good bit on the video on relative motion versus orientation. So if you haven't seen that, check that out. But you can look, there's a whole new level of size and definition. Nothing has grown in this time frame as much as my back. And here's just a shot of a lat spread, and I'm just showing you guys this because you should never take advice from somebody who can't walk the walk, who doesn't have proof in the pudding. So if someone's trying to tell you how to build up a back and their back looks like shit, don't listen to them, okay? No matter how scientific based they may be. So this also kind of demonstrates the difference in posing. So I was working with Kenny Wallach, who, if you don't know, is the best posing coach in America for sure. And we were kind of working on 2 different poses. The one on the left, I'm trying to pop more thickness. I'm trying to kind of round it out a little bit more, look more 3D. And the one on the right, I'm trying to look more wide, get a little more width. So we ended up going with the one on the right because I'm just a little bit narrow naturally, so the extra width tended to help. But that just shows you how you can present differently. And during this time period where I made this change in about, I guess this was over about 6 years, five years, I really made a conscious effort to stop arching my back every time I pulled. I really made an effort to get out of extension. I was having a lot of neck and back issues just randomly. Once every 3 months, something would happen, and I'd have to take it easy for weeks at a time before it would get better. So I consciously stopped doing so much extension on my back and leg days, and I didn't expect my back to blow up, but it did. And this is something that I don't really see anyone else do, and I think that's why my back tends to look different. All right, so I'm going to give you guys just the Cliff Notes version right here, right now, so that if you don't want to watch the next 30 minutes or however long I start rambling on, you can just watch this little clip and you'll get the gist of what I'm talking about. So if we really want to build an impressive back, there's a couple concepts we have to understand and apply. First is we don't want to compress the rib cage either direction. So we don't want to overstretch and round there. And when we pull, we don't want to arch your back. That's not helping you get more back muscles at all. It's actually shortening the distance that your scapula is going to travel using the muscles that are pulling it together. You're losing tension. So you don't want to round and compress the rib cage there. And you don't want to compress the posterior rib cage by arching the back as you pull, or by just starting super arch. In general, that's not what you want to do. Now, keeping a stack, keeping your rib cage down and your core engaged, that'll take care of 80% of the problems you have when you train your back if you just do that. Another concept that you really need to understand is that every kind of pulling motion you do, more horizontal pull, but it can be pretty vertical too, just maybe not totally vertical, is going to have different degrees of retraction and downward rotation and depression. Okay, your lat is going to have a big role in this shoulder, this glenohumeral depression, this shoulder girdle depression, and your rhomboids, your traps, they're going to have a big role in the retraction. You can always apply some level of that depression to your retraction to get more lats or less lats depending on what you want. So if I pull here with no depression at all, I'm not really getting a ton of lats. It's going to be more of the retraction muscles, mid-traps and rhomboids. If I pull from there but I drive down a little bit, now I'm going to get some lats involved. If I pull from there and I drive down like a lot, I'm going to really drive some more lats. And so no matter what position you pull from, you can always vary how much lats you're going to get engaged by pulling the shoulder girdle down. And if you want to pull using your rear delts, you want to try to get your elbow at about 45 degrees-ish, and you want to try to pull with some of your serratus on and your shoulder blade not moving a ton. So I'll demonstrate this later in detail, but just for now, that is me pulling with my rear delt. I can feel that right there. That is me pulling with retraction, and that is me pulling with more lat, going through that depression, all from the same relative elbow angle. So if you can understand those concepts, that's the whole video. Keep your rib cage down, rear delts are pulling without retraction, a little bit of serratus activation, and how much lat you engage on any kind of rowing motion is going to be based off of how much shoulder depression we're applying to that move. Okay, if you understand that, that's 90% of this video, okay? And you can stop here. If you want to get nerdy and get more detailed, we'll break out the rib cage a little bit. Keep on going. Okay, so I always like to show some examples of bad technique versus good technique at the beginning of these types of videos. So I know I could turn to good old Dr. Mike to always provide a shining example of what not to do. Never fails. Whatever body part it is, I'll just go to him to look for shitty examples. I mean, this is the same guy that tells you don't need to focus on your triceps because you build them during rowing movements. So yeah, definitely don't take his back advice. So we check it out. We have these pullovers. I kind of critiqued these on the last scrolling through IG video that I did, but we see a lot of the orientation in that rib cage in the back right there. We just want to keep that rib cage down. You'll keep way more tension on the lats. All right, so when we watch these pull downs, I see the same super flared rib cage. He always flares and extends from that same kind of T8 position of his spine. And then when you can do that, you can see, if you really look at this, you can see it takes away shoulder extension. So if you don't keep your rib cage down in the beginning of your pull, you're missing out on those rear delts starting it, and you're missing out on some lats starting it too. You're kind of going right to those retraction and downward rotation muscles, which you can get even more effectively still with keeping your stack. You don't have to throw up your stack to get those. So I mean, everything about this is wrong. Using momentum, starting arch and arching even more as you're getting to the bottom. And like I said, that just throws off the whole glenohumeral rhythm, the whole scapulothoracic rhythm. You're not able to keep a lot of time under tension. You're not able to get a full stretch on the way up because the scapula's not going to be able to glide all the way up and outward, because when your thoracic rib cage is all compressed and tight, it doesn't have that convex shape for the scapula to move on, so it can't get a full stretch. So yeah, like I said, everything about this is pretty wrong. And here we see what I was talking about, the compression of the rib cage leaning into the pad and the compression coming off of it. So you're not getting any more stretch on the muscles when you do that. So if I'm on a pad and I'm stretching, that's the stretch. That's full stretch of my back muscles. All of that, that's not the back. All you're doing is compressing the rib cage. So you're taking tension off of the back. You're just putting it on your axial skeleton. Then as you pull, don't pop out your titties. Don't hit that big arch. Keep your stack. Pull. Get retraction like as it should happen through the natural glenohumeral rhythm. If you just extend right away, you're missing that full natural rhythm. You can still get a really big squeeze. You don't have to arch to do that. And remember, the more you kind of throw off the shape of your axial skeleton, the more your joints are affected in a negative way. It's going to orient them outward. You're going to start losing ranges of motion in your shoulders. All right, so let's look at another influencer with just terrible biomechanics as another bad example. That is going to be good old Paul Carter. All right, and we look at this, he's basically doing exactly what I was just talking about with Mike. The extreme compression down, the big arch up, but he's even doing one more thing that's even worse, is he's starting to meet the bar down. At least when Mike was going, he was just going into extension with the bar. So what you never want to do is you never want to pull and then go down and actually shorten that distance. If you're doing that, it's too heavy. I mean, I don't like to just even come up, but at least then you're pulling the weight with you. And he only did a little bit there, more there, and a lot more there. So essentially you're taking out that in-range contraction, which some people think doesn't matter. I sure as fuck think matters a lot when it comes to back. Some people think you only need the stretch position, right? What are the lengthened partials? Phil Heath had a terrible back when he first became a pro. It wasn't good at all. It became the best back in the world. And one of the things he said he always did was he would hold that short range contraction for a slight pause. He really focused on the squeeze. So not going to find any evidence-based study, but greatness leaves clues, and I'm going to follow in their footsteps, especially when you can see it like working for them. It changed. He didn't always just have an amazing back. And then we'll also look at James Hollinshead, who I actually like a lot. I feel bad for having to put him with these two guys, but he does the same thing. He just kind of really, really braces against the pad, and he starts to compensate in pretty bad ways on this as well. He'll start arching up, but then he gets to the point where he starts lifting up his hips and trying to just orient his whole body. So right now we're just arching as we're pulling. You know, it's a little sloppy, but I can take it. Now the hips come off the pad. Now we're getting momentum. Now we're fucking the pad and we're driving those hips in to try to get a little more pull, but all we're doing is getting a lot more lower back. And I really think this is one of the reasons why James has been dealing with a lot of aches and pains, because I think he's put his axial skeleton through a lot by having to make it handle a lot of the load when it shouldn't. So let's look at a couple good examples. We'll look at JP, who is James's homie and training partner, and he does his rows a lot different. It's really good for a big guy. Doesn't overcompress as it comes in, and he pulls, he gets a little extension, but he's not rolling off the pad hard at all. These are super impressive for somebody pulling such heavy weight. It's going to be really easy to just lean a little bit extra into it to get a little bit more, but he's staying on that pad pretty good. And then if you look at my guy Robin, you guys know I'm a big fan of the way Robin trains, even if it does look a little boring. It doesn't look the most intense all the time, but it's effective. So compare this to the way we saw Dr. Mike doing it, where Dr. Mike was arching at that T8 vertebrae, losing a lot of tension on the lats. This is really good tension on the lats. We're getting good scapular depression. Mike was not getting any of this. This looks way better. Here we have a row where it looks like he's trying to focus more on traps, like upper traps. And this is really good. You can see he's starting with some shoulder extension. He's not arching like crazy. He's putting the tension where he really wants. This looks really good, actually. I haven't looked at this post yet, so I don't know what I'm walking into. And I actually hate dumbbell rows, but Robin looks really good doing this. I like how he has the opposite leg forward. He's pulling for a little more lats here by getting that extra shoulder extension. But again, look, there's no movement from the hips. He's not getting a crazy arch. I mean, this is really tight form for a dumbbell row. Then we have some pull downs, underhand, and I always think you should include some kind of underhand movement, a pull down or like an underhand cable bar row. And this is really good. You can see he's not arching the back. He's keeping his rib cage down even as those arms come up, so he can get a really good stretch on all the lats. Oh yeah, these are money. So I mean, if I were to pick out one pro who I work out the most similar to, it would definitely be Robin. And he has got 6 separation, and I do think the way we work out contributes to that. So right before I posted this, I actually saw that Basement Bodybuilding had posted a video, and I was just checking it out. And he provides a pretty good example of like a common mistake that people make with their vertical pulls, and I'll cover it too in just a second, but I want to show you him doing it first. All right, so we're in this underhand pull down, and we kind of have that similar T8 extension pattern that Dr. Mike has. So he does do a much better job just looking at his technique, actually, of getting those shoulder blades to go further out. He doesn't get as much elevation up with those shoulder blades, so this is better for sure than Dr. Mike, but I would just recommend getting out of that little bit of the extension, the excessive extension, just engaging the abs just a little bit. You can still pull from that angle, but lean back and do from a little bit more of a neutral core position, and you'll feel a lot more in the lats and a lot more in everything that you're trying to work, but a lot more in the shoulder extensors in particular. And it's not like this is terrible or anything at all. Basement's, pretty connected to his body. I mean, I would not like harp on this at all, but that would make a difference. I guarantee you he would feel a difference. And a lot of people try to write off mind muscle connection. Anyone tells you that does not matter, do not listen to anything they say. Mind muscle connection means everything, in my opinion. It really does. I connect to everything so good the way that I work out, and I get such bad DOMs every single time I work out. When I used to not, even after I've been working out for 10 years, I wasn't getting sore at all. Now I've been working out for 20 years, I get sore every single day, and that's because I just tightened up my form, which was already good. Now, it's hard to explain all the reasons why it's beneficial to keep your stack, keep a little bit of your core on. Don't over-engage it, but try to keep your rib cage from just going crazy. Keep your pelvis from just going crazy. And there's different reasons, and there's different physiological reasons that I know. There's different reasons that I have ideas for, and there's a lot of different theories out there. DNS talks about the theory of joint centration, where when we're neutral spine, it just lines up your joints in a way to transfer force most effectively. You're going to keep more tension on the muscles if you don't start to go into these compressive techniques. So it's just more time under tension, in my opinion, because you're not losing that tension to the actual axial skeleton or the connective tissue. And you're also going to get true length and tension when you don't compromise your rib cage. So like we talked about on the bench press, that's a real good example. That's why I'm so sore all the time. Whenever we're getting to the end of the press, if we keep our rib cage, that is the real stretch. If we arch, we've lost it. Like on the lat stretch, if we don't have that shape, you're not gonna get a full stretch. If you have that flared out rib cage, you're missing the full stretch on your lats on the eccentric load. So I'll show you an example of me doing this, similar to basement. And also it's the kind of thing where it's like, I don't think if you like lose your stack by like 10% and you do 20% more weight, I don't think that equals better. I think like if you lose it just a little bit, like more than like 5%, if you've lost your form, say more than 5%, then I think you've lost the plot. And at that point, you might as well just load heavier because you're already not getting what we really need by using relative motion. You know, I don't know all the reasons why, but just managing that pressure and not giving in to those compressive forces just makes you feel so much more on the muscle. So here's me doing the pull down, and this is what I see all the time. People pulling in this extended position, thinking this is better because they feel stronger from here. You need to get rid of that arch. This is kind of just like basement was. Pull there. I got way more lats. It's way heavier. I'm also getting more of the retraction muscles and the downward rotation muscles, even though I may not think I am because I'm not arching. I'm not getting as aggressive of a squeeze, but trust me, they are working more. I have some of the most developed mid traps, rhomboids you'll see on stage, and that's why, because I do not extend when I pull. All right, so this is just an example of me showing you how to pull with different intent, like I showed you earlier, but using a weight. So this is a rear delt focused pull. Notice I don't have a ton of scapula movement. You know, a little bit is happening, but I'm mainly pulling with that delt. I'm staying kind of protracted as I pull to counter that retraction. Okay, so now I'm gonna pull just for my lat. I'm gonna really focus on my lat. So I'm driving down, trying to get full glenohumeral depression, a little bit of a side bend. That's gonna really fire the lat. Now, if I want to pull more for just retraction muscles, I'm not going to drive down as far, but I'm going to drive back as far as I can without arching and popping the chest up. And here's what it looks like if I were to pull for a rear delt. There's my rear delt. Now here's a lat pull with that same elbow angle. So I still have the elbow out, but now I'm driving some depression, and now this is just more of a retraction focus. So let's look at that one more time, see if you can see the subtle little difference. Okay, so rear delt pulls, minimal shoulder movement. Lat pull, I'm driving down, getting some glenohumeral depression. Now full retraction, trading out the depression just to get more retraction. So real subtle differences, and here's just a little different angle where you can see, I don't think I do the rear delt, but this is how you can just pull horizontal and get the lat by driving down and getting that glenohumeral depression, or I can just pull straight up and keep it on mid traps and rhomboids. So there's mid traps and rhomboids. You see how I'm not arching, I'm not rotating. Now I'm gonna start driving down, pulling from roughly the same angle though, and I'm gonna get more lats. I'm not isolating lats because I'm not going through full depression, but I'm getting some. And now I'm back to pulling high, getting more retraction muscles, and back down. So you can vary it up based off of where you need it. And you can follow that pattern wherever you wanna start from. So here I'm driving down for lats, and now I'm gonna switch it to get some more retraction, more downward rotation muscles. These are still lats. That's all lats. Do I switch it? I think I switch it. Now I'm just driving back. So again, I'm not going as down, so I'm not getting as much lats. I'm still getting some lats, but now I'm getting those rhomboids and mid traps. And just the same concept, just a little different angle. This is probably like my favorite way to target lats, is to do the depression one. So there I'm doing more retraction. Earlier was depression. So I'm gonna cover some of my favorite moves and break down some different technique things that you can do. My go-to move is typically a bench supported dumbbell row. I actually prefer this over T-bar rows. I feel like it's just a little more variability. I like to extend sets sometimes by just changing very slightly kind of where I'm pulling from, and I have that ability using dumbbells. I don't think I'm doing that on this, but that's something that I do pretty often. So this just shows you how you should pull without getting extension. My head should be up a little bit. I don't know why I'm looking down so much, but I'm pausing for 2 seconds, and I'm pulling in a position where I'm trying to get a pretty good retraction muscles. I could pull driving lower with my elbows and I get more lats, or I could bring these elbows a little bit more out. I mean, I'm getting pretty good rear delts on this, but I could isolate them even more if I wanted to. And then I'm getting to failure. And for me, failure is gonna be, without me trying to get wonky to get more. Those arms are just gonna stop moving. I'm not gonna start arching to help myself get more. I go to like real mechanical failure. Here's an example of a barbell row. This is just 185, and this is how I like to row without really any movement, try to stay pretty flat. Don't let yourself arch as you're pulling, and really keep the shape of the rib cage. And this is super heavy. This makes 185 feel super hard. And then sometimes after I do a set of this where I'm going real strict, I will let myself use a tiny bit of body language. So this is 90 pounds more. This is 275. And you can see now I'm using a little bit of extension. I'm not meeting it as I talked about. I'm just kind of driving up with it. I'm not coming to the point where I'm lowering. You never want to do that. And this is really the only move where I like any kind of like movement from the torso. Is like maybe a bent over free weight row. Sometimes I've done like a dumbbell row with a little bit of flexion going into extension. That could work. Whenever we do a row, if we get like a little extension, we're leveraged in a way that we're using erector muscles to help with that. If you're on a pad and you're arching up, you're just pushing into the pad and like leveraging yourself backwards. You're not getting the same kind of activation as if you're doing a barbell and you're bringing it up a little bit with you in a controlled manner. So this is really the only time I like a little body movement on my back days. And that's something that I've changed a lot. I used to think it was okay to be a lot sloppier with back. I don't really think that way anymore. So let's go into a little bit more lat things. And as you guys know, lats make a huge difference on your physique. My front double bicep was terrible. Here is one of the shows I did where I lost the overall to this heavyweight, but man, I was competitive, and a large part was because I really finally connected to my lats over that year. If you look at my front double is not that great, but my lats really pull it together. And it makes all the difference in the world. If you don't have good lats, your front double is going to look like garbage, no matter how good your biceps are. And so you can see, I have kind of a wide waist too. I need my lats to pop to help out. So here's a couple of my favorite lat focus moves. This is just a superset that I'll do sometimes. I'm doing like a single arm lat pull, like people do with the rope, but I'm kind of overloading the negative. I'm helping a little bit on the way up. I'm using a cuff. And then once I get really close to failure, or right at failure, I'm going to go ahead and switch to using that same arm for a lat focused row. Now I really like this row because it's a really good stretch across the body with the lat. So you really get a good stretch on the way up. And again, I'm doing this overloaded, so I'm really helping drive down that glenohumeral depression, and I'm just controlling it up. So I have a little bit of a side bend to get even more out of that. And yeah, that is a really good stretch. This is one of my favorite ways to hit lats. I do this all the time. Not always the superset, but this move I do a ton. Here's just another example of me doing this. And on here, I'm starting just on my own, but I think I turn this into an overloaded negative as well. I usually do that. I really like doing that on this move. So I'm really driving down, focused on just lat. I don't have a lot of shoulder blade movement at all. Another superset I'm a big fan of doing is this dumbbell pullover with a cable pullover. And it's funny because I've been doing this for years and years and years, and I started working with Justin Compton like 2 months ago, and he prescribed this exact same superset. So it's funny because I've already been doing this forever, but I like this because you really get length and tension on the lats here. Try to keep your ribs a little controlled. They're coming up, but I'm not flaring uncontrollably. You don't want to do that because you're going to lose tension on the lats. You should flare. They should come in external rotation. That's fine, but don't let go of everything. And so I'm kind of doing a little more of a partial here because I'm going to focus on the shortened range using the cable right here. And so as you're doing your cable lat pull, just make sure to push to the ground, get that depression, and push the bar far away on the way up. And so since I did the dumbbell first, I didn't do it this way, but normally I do it this way on the cable pull down to get the full stretch. I'll lean over and then stand up as I pull. So this is kind of similar to the pull down I showed you earlier, but this is using body weight pull-ups. So if you want to get a lot of lats, you need to close down your rib cage, keep space in that dorsal roster area, and pull from there. So I'm getting more shoulder extension, so I'm going to get more lats. This is much harder too. So I'm closed down my abs, I'm pulling from there. Now I'm going to let go. I'm going to go in extension. And what do we see? This is less shoulder extension. Now I've got more like prime movers coming from in between the shoulder blades. And so I have the ribs kind of flared. And it just depends on what you want to hit. If I want to hit lats, I'm going to close down hard. If I want to get more of my retraction muscles, I'm going to flare out. I'm still going to keep some abs on, but I'm not going to focus on keeping the ribs down with like everything I got. So that's lats, internal torsion, as they would call in the Weck method. These are the retraction and downward rotation muscles, or external torsion as they call it, using the Weck method too. Now this is a really good lat move if you ever have trouble connecting to your lats. Your lats have a big role in humeral adduction coming to your side. So sometimes doing this angle, pulling from the side where you turn and get a little back extension really helps connect because you're hitting like the fully shortened position of the lat. And so this is something I always did kind of intuitively on my own when I was younger because I could never connect to lats. And then later I saw that this is actually like a really good functional move for a number of reasons. But this is what it looks like from the backside. And so if you have trouble connecting to your lats, do that as a warm-up and you'll really connect to that. You'll feel them better on everything else you do. All right, let's cover some rear delt stuff as well. I think I covered a pretty good amount of rear delt stuff in my shoulder video, so there might be a little bit of overlap. I'm not gonna go as in depth on this. I'll just touch on a few things real quick. And when it comes to programming, you can program your rear delts with your shoulder day and have that separate from your back day, or you can have a back day where you hit everything, or you can have a back day where you focus on horizontal pulls maybe and you get your rear delts there, and then a different day where it's more vertical, whatever. But if you hit your back and your rear delts together, this is a move that I like. And I do this on typically the free motion row, which is kind of like a throwaway machine. So if you're at a gym that's pretty busy, a lot of times you're kind of limited on options, but free motion rows, typically not taken. That's the one where it's got the two cables here and your knees are set. I actually take the knee thing out and I put my feet up on the machine, but you don't got to do that. And you can think of that setup the same thing as I am on here. So I'm pulling using my retraction muscles. You're getting rear delts just in the sense that they're operating to start the move with a normal scapulohumeral rhythm, but the main focus was the retraction. Now I've closed down the ribs and I've lost that amount of retraction. You can see the rear delts are looking like they're working a lot more. So let's just take another look. We can see a lot more movement of the scapula. I'm still not arching though. I'm getting good movement. Now I'm going to close down. I'm going to round a little bit. And now I'm getting big rear delts, way more than I was. When I say round a little bit, just slight flexion. Don't slouch and round like crazy. What I really like is I like to do these alternating rotations. So a lot of times I'll do two together, then I'll start to go into the alternating, or sometimes I'll do like a rear delt focus and then switch. Like I think here I'm going to do rear delt. These are more rear delt, and then sometimes I switch to just more of the retraction as I get fatigued. But those alternating are really good if you really want to isolate rear delt. Another good move I like to do for my rear delts is things involving external rotation. I like to do some external rotation focused move on my back day. Good for joint health, but also, like I said, can really help get your rear delts involved. I like to do cable W's, kind of set apart. So part of the motion is the rotation, but part of it is also like the act of pulling those elbows apart and getting that shoulder abduction. So you're going to be getting some rear delts from the rotation and from pulling up and back. And so on these, you just want to make sure, like everything, keep your rib cage stable. So this is the third video I've made about biomechanics for a specific body part, so don't do that. I did chest and I did shoulders, and there's a very common theme if you haven't seen it. Don't let your fucking rib cage move. All right, for your chest, it's in order to keep length and tension as you're really getting to the bottom. For your shoulders, you got to keep your rib cage in a good position so that you can actually keep your scapula on the far end pretty abducted, so you can isolate your delts a lot better when you're trying to target them and not lose tension. And then on your back, the stack is so important because it's what's going to allow you to get stretch tension on your lats and what's going to allow you to get full range of motion and full contraction of the scapula. Okay, because you lose that if you go into that big arch. So common theme is keep your ribs in place. Those feel really good. I usually use these as more of a warm-up. Now, if you really lack rear delts and you want to really focus on them, to find the best angle to hit them, I mentioned earlier that 45 degrees is roughly where you want to be, but it's kind of different on everybody depending on your setup. So one way to find out where is most optimal is to just pull your elbow back by your side and some shoulder extension. So remember, shoulder extension isn't retraction, so just pull what you can until your shoulder retracts. Now we're going to lift that elbow up and move it back. Once you get to the point that we can't move it any further behind us, if I go any higher, my shoulder pops forward and I've got to retract to move it back. This is my in range of extension. That's where I'm going to get the most direct load on that rear delt, assuming I'm keeping shape to my rib cage. So those pull aparts from down here are really good. Heavy rows from there are really good. I really like bent over cable pulls, like focusing on the rear delt. Those are all really good. You don't have to come out of any super specific angle. I think for a while people were saying like you had to come right there to hit your rear delts. You don't have to come from that angle. You can pull from here and you get tons of rear delts, but you just want to keep it on as much shoulder extension as possible. That's the key. We got some more rear delts here. This kind of shows you how you can do flies, trying to focus on rear delts, Or you can do flies and focus on those mid-back muscles, and you can apply this to machines, cables, anything, so you can see the difference there. I actually really love this using kettlebells for rear delts. This is one of my favorites. Here is a rear delt triple set that it's really funny. I did this exact same thing myself, and Justin Compton also programmed this into my workouts. So great minds really do think alike. Maybe eventually I'll be a fucking monster the way he was. So this is miserable. What you do on this is you start with just straight flies, and I'm kind of getting a little bit of everything. I'm not trying to isolate rear delts. They're definitely big in the movement, but I'm getting a lot of retraction, and I'm gonna go to absolute failure on this once I can't hit the full range of failure. Sometimes if I'm doing this by itself, I'll go to partials too, like right after this. But you're gonna go to rows, focusing on the rear delts. So I don't have a lot of shoulder blade movement. I'm keeping a lot of tension on those rear delts. They are Bernie Sanders right now, like making me really hate Justin at this point. And so once I get to failure on there, then we have the best part. We get to finish with those partials. So now I am going to try to hit more rear delts. So I'm going to really, really stretch down and try to touch far away on these partial flies. So here they are. So I'm trying not to actively retract, but I really couldn't anyways if I wanted to. So I'm going to go till I can't really go anymore and make sure my elbows don't start to turn too much backwards. They're kind of pointing outward. A lot of people start to turn in, try to get some help from the Terrys. And that's to Justin. That's not to you guys. Now, a lot of people put traps on their back day. I usually have it on my shoulder day, but if you have it on your back day, the one motion that I think people really overlook is this upward rotation. We don't really do that. Some people need downward rotation, and you can actually do this move for that too, but I like to focus on the traps by doing upward rotation because that'll get the lower and the upper fibers. So on this, you're just reaching as far away as you can, kind of go as much in front of you as possible. This also get a little bit of rear delts too, but this is a really underrated move that I've done for years and years and years, and it's really good for just shoulder health as well. A lot of people could benefit from getting these shoulders to upwardly rotate and to open up from here. Now, if you're one of these people who's just so closed down, you might benefit from trying to depress the shoulders instead of upwardly rotate them too. So you can do that from this position as well. Sometimes I do that. Another move I really like for traps is this kind of elevation with retraction. I'm not a huge fan of just elevating, trying to do traps. It tends to be more like neck stuff. I want to combine that elevation with retraction if I'm hitting traps typically. And I also really love face pulls for traps. So there's a couple ways you can do this. I'm using this longer kind of rope because I don't like the normal short black rope that you see at gyms. And there's two different ways that you can do this. This way I'm doing it now is going to get a little bit more like mid-trap, a little more like posterior delt from external rotation activation. And the way I'm going to do it in a second is going to be more Terry's, a little bit more shoulder extension in general, probably more downward rotation. So this is one way to face pull with palms down. Arms won't go quite as high. The hands won't go as high. Getting a lot of rear delt, a lot of Terrys, a lot of rhomboids and mid traps too. Or you can go underhand, come up higher with your elbows. You're going to get more external rotation and a little bit less downward rotation, but more retraction. And so I'm using this rope, but if you were to use just like a normal rope, I don't like the short one. That makes me elevate too much. They do have longer ones, and you can use the short one, but one of them I'm gripping this way, the higher one. The other one, I'm gripping that way. That's the lower one. Both good, they just do a little bit different function. One thing to keep in mind is it can be easier to keep your stack and not go into this extension if you make sure you're exhaling as you pull. Most of the time, we always exhale automatically when we're doing work. You're gonna exhale when you press, exhale when you stand up from your squat. A lot of people, they don't do that intuitively on their pulls for a number of reasons. Just make sure you exhale as you're doing work. So when it comes to programming, do everything. You know, I'm a big fan of changing up little variables every single time. People will say, oh, well, you can't progress. Dude, if I change the cable from like one height to like 2 clicks below, it's not gonna throw me off. I'm fine. My body understands the movement pattern. So we wanna get retraction from different angles. We wanna get depression from different angles. We wanna get shoulder extension from different angles. And we want to include a little upward rotation with our trap work. You do all these things, you're going to have a very detailed back. You're not going to be missing any pieces. So hopefully this will be useful for some of you guys, and you can start making some gains that you haven't been able to make, because having a really good back it's cool. You know, I always had a good front, especially as a competitor. It brings a different level of respect when you have a really good developed backside. I mean, the show me muscles, they're fun, but they're a little bit easier to get. So apply these concepts, use some of these techniques, and let me know if it's working for you. All right, thanks.